So some incredible news, frankly, talking about Impact Wrestling's television ratings this week, because Impact Wrestling saw a major dip in viewership and ratings in the key demographic for the final Tuesday night episode before they move to Thursday nights coming soon. Now, Tuesday's taped episode of Impact Wrestling, which of course featured James Storm, defeated Eric Young in the main event for his 1000th Impact Wrestling match, drew just 38,000 live viewers on AXS TV across both hours. This is according to Showbuzz Daily. The show drew a 0.01 rating in the key 18 to 49 demographic. This week's Impact did not even make the cable top 150, so there are no rankings for the viewership and key demographic ratings. Now, these numbers are down, obviously, significantly from last week's episode, which drew 116,000 live viewers, which even then, that was considered a low number. And there was a lot of discussion about Kenny Omega, because of course Kenny Omega made his first appearance inside the Impact Zone, inside of an Impact Wrestling ring on Impact Wrestling on AXS TV last week, and that only drew 116,000 live viewers, and there was a lot of discussion then. We did a video talking about it, how it wasn't a good number, and how Impact Wrestling needed to reevaluate and it needed to look at things and see where things went wrong. And last week in the key demographic, it drew a 0.04 rating, and obviously this week it's 0.01. So last week's episode ranked 146th in the cable top 150 and 135 for the night in viewership, but obviously this week they didn't even rank. Now, as I mentioned, this was the final Tuesday Night Impact episode on AXS TV. The show moves to Thursday nights beginning next week. Of course, this is ahead of NXT officially moving to Tuesday nights, so they're trying to avoid the competition there, which, looking at the ratings now without even NXT on the Tuesday nights, it's a smart thing to do. Now, why we got this really low number? Well, obviously there is a few things to dive into there, but this, unless it's some kind of error from the Nielsen rating system, which it doesn't appear to be. I mean, it might be because the number is just that low. It's strange because when the news came out yesterday on social media, Impact Wrestling drew 38,000 live viewers. My initial reaction was, oh, that must just be for one of the demographics. They must have drawn 38,000 for, say, the key demo, and that's a low number. But after a bit of discussion, after a bit of people checking it out, because obviously, as mentioned, it didn't rank on the cable top 150, after people checking it out, it's become apparent that no, it was 38,000 live viewers across 2 hours on AXS TV. Now, as I mentioned, unless this is some kind of error, this would be a record low for the show since it moved to AXS TV in the fall of 2019. Which, again, it's beyond significant. It really isn't good, considering that this was meant to be the period that Impact Wrestling was going to do decent numbers for AXS TV. We're in the build to Rebellion in April, or this month now. We're in the build to Rebellion, which of course is the title versus title main event between Kenny Omega and Rich Swann for both the AEW World Championship and the Impact World Championship. I think Impact and AEW as well, because they've got a stake in this, I think they both would have thought, okay, this is going to be where we really do some good business, and it's not happening. It's not happening. I mean, this week's Impact Wrestling viewership was not only down 67.24% from last week, the 18 to 49 rating was down 75% from last week. And this week's Impact viewership was down 68.9% from the same week in 2020. And as I mentioned, I mean, that's almost par for the course, I think, when it comes to, dipping year on year, because that's what television does. Viewership and ratings, they are declining every single year, and that's just across the board, unless you've got this giant hit on your hand, which is, at this point, atypical for television. But to be down close to 70% from the same week in 2020, you can't even really use the pandemic as an excuse anymore. Because, I mean, we were in the pandemic last year at this point. It's just, I don't know. They've got to do some soul searching. They've absolutely got to do some soul searching. Now, obviously, they had some competition. They had some competition this week, and I think that maybe that's the reason. People are saying that's the reason why they did such a bad rating and a really bad viewership this week, which would be the NCAA tournament, which did a big number on ESPN. The first game did a 1.36 demo rating and 5.399 million viewers, with the second game starting at 9:49 Eastern Time doing a 1.82 demo rating. Impact would have gone up against the first game and traditionally taken heavy hits when big sports are up against it. So potentially people might look at that and say, it's because they had competition. This is the reason they're moving off of Tuesday nights, because they were going to have regular competition when NXT moves to Tuesdays. It's a proven fact at this point that when they've competed with NXT, in that rare occasion when NXT did air on the Tuesday, or when they've had major sports like this NCAA tournament, they've been crushed. I mean, I'm trying to think of a better word because I don't even know if crushed really really explains everything there, because I mean they were decimated. They've been absolutely decimated this week. So it is alarming. It is alarming. I think what is interesting now, because as I mentioned, this is incredibly drastic. Obviously, I don't think that if they stayed on Tuesdays, even with the competition of NXT. Because when they had NXT in those Super Tuesday spots last year, I think they still drew like 78,000 live viewers, which even then was very, very low. But considering the competition, I mean, so I guess this is the proof that the only thing at this point that does good numbers on cable television at this point is sports or news. That is pretty much it, And I think Impact obviously will be incredibly alarmed, incredibly concerned. As I mentioned, this is meant to be the period of time that they're going to be doing excellent business. I think if you're AEW as well, again, you have to look at it as well. I mean, they're featuring some AEW stars on the show. You're obviously featuring your top star, your champion, Kenny Omega, on the broadcast. He was on there again this week. Does it hurt them, AEW financially? Obviously not. But from a reputation point of view, AEW must look at that and say, well, we've got our stars on this show that nobody's watching. I mean, when a number like this comes out, I mean, usually people aren't paying too much attention. I mean, the wide stream, if you're watching these videos, if you're a fan of this channel, you'll pay attention to the videos that we post. And there's obviously a cult following of Impact Wrestling on social media. And obviously their audience isn't as big as it used to be. And their reach, incredibly, it's been drastically reduced. And the reach isn't as big as it used to be. But there still is a following for Impact Wrestling. So... But my point being, it's not as big as it used to be. And whenever the ratings come out, whenever the viewership comes out every single week, not a lot of people really pick up on those stories unless you're really interested or inclined to do so. But this number is so significantly bad and so significantly low that people are paying attention. I saw on my timeline, and I'm sure you did yesterday on your timeline, see so many people talking about the Impact Wrestling viewership and the Impact Wrestling ratings way more than ever usually do. Why? Because it was bad. Because it was shockingly bad. And considering, as I mentioned, they've got this big move going to Thursday nights, and there is going to be some concern, isn't there, about the audience that they had. Are they going to follow them to Thursday nights? I think they will, because I think the audience is so small that they're so dedicated to watching Impact Wrestling anyway that they will follow them to Thursday nights. I think, as I mentioned, the officials and executives must be looking at this going, wait, this is the second week in a row that we've had a bad number. And obviously this week's number isn't even comparable to last week's number. I think last week, that 116,000 live viewers, that was, eyebrows were raised and eyes were open because people said that wasn't good. Considering the Kenny Omega debut episode last year in December did something like 221,000 live viewers. I mean, last week having 116, people went, wait a minute, what's going on there? It seemed like there was something wrong, because Kenny Omega was making his debut on Inside the Impact Zone on AXS TV, and now this week, I mean, 38,000 is practically no one watched. Practically no one watched. People, small YouTubers get more views than that, or even some wrestling channels here on YouTube that just talk about pro wrestling get more views than that. I've had videos that have got more views than that. We're hardly, a professional outfit here. So it's incredibly alarming. I think something that will have to be discussed is something that we kind of touched on last week, is that this whole AEW and Impact Wrestling working relationship, I myself have been a huge fan of it and a huge proponent of it, because I do think both companies benefit from it. But there is a growing feeling, and I've noticed it by some people here on the channel, and I've noticed it on social media, there is a growing feeling that maybe this whole AEW influence maybe is negatively impacting the viewership base that Impact Wrestling had initially, and maybe it's alienating those fans that they had initially. And I think that's a good point to bring up, to be honest. I think that's a good point, that maybe if you're a fan of Impact Wrestling, if you're a fan of the product, and if you're a fan of what Impact Wrestling has done over the course of the last couple of years, especially in the Scott D'Amore and Don Callis era, and you're a fan of everything that Impact Wrestling has been doing, maybe you don't want an outside influence like AEW. Maybe you don't want to see AEW wrestlers and Tony Khan and Kenny Omega on the show. Maybe you just want to watch Impact Wrestling. And I don't think anyone really considered that. I myself certainly didn't. I don't think I ever felt that watching Impact Wrestling, I always saw it as a positive that you had some of the biggest stars in the world, one of the best wrestlers in the world right now, Kenny Omega, appearing on the programming. I always thought that was a good thing, and I still do. I mean, I think it brings star power, but the idea of these big names coming over, bringing big ratings and big viewership, it's kind of gone the other way now. Because of course, when Kenny Omega made his debut initially on Impact, you had that giant number. And after that, when you had surprises like Matt Hardy and Private Party and Tony Khan showing up, and even the New Japan crossover as well, of having Finjuice there, every single time they appeared, or the following week if it was a surprise appearance, you saw this big spike in the viewership, and you saw this big spike in the ratings, and the evidence was there that having those big names on the program really did benefit in terms of the amount of people that watched. And obviously Impact Wrestling, when you look at their viewership as well, you have to look at other factors, because obviously AXS TV, ironically, is so difficult to access. You do have to look at their Twitch numbers, and you have to look at their YouTube numbers and their social media numbers. But this week, you can't even really use that as an excuse. You can't say, well, the Twitch numbers were up, because they weren't as well. Everything was significantly down. The viewership, the ratings, Twitch, YouTube, social media, everything for Impact Wrestling was down this week. And maybe it is because you have to try and find reasons. You can use competition as an excuse, but ultimately you have to put on a good product. If you put on a good product, if you make must-see television, people will watch because it's must-see. It's in the name. And for whatever reason, despite the strong competition this week from the NCAA tournament, Impact Wrestling just didn't put on a strong program, I guess, this week. They didn't put on a strong enough program for people to tune in and watch. Now, is this because of the tournament? Is this because it's WrestleMania season? Is this because people are kind of going, well, there's going to be a lot of pro wrestling coming on in the next 10 days or so. I need to sort of, rest before I get my complete fix, before I overdose on it in the next couple of weeks. I don't know. Ultimately, Impact Wrestling will have to look at themselves. They can use excuses like competition. They can use excuses like, oh, the audience is focused on WrestleMania. They can do whatever they want. Ultimately, they have to look at themselves, because the audience never lies. The audience never lies, and the show that they put on Tuesday, I didn't think it was a bad show at all. I enjoyed the Wildcat Chris Harris return. I enjoyed the main event. I enjoyed the James Storm, Eric Young stuff. I enjoyed the Kenny Omega segment. I enjoyed Don Callis and Willie Mack. I enjoyed all of that. I really did. I enjoyed Jazz and Deonna Purrazzo. I'm enjoying Impact Wrestling programming at the moment, but for whatever reason, because the audience does not lie, Impact Wrestling didn't put on a good enough show this week to entice viewers to watch the show. They just didn't. And once again, Impact Wrestling is going to have to look at themselves and say, what are we doing wrong? What are we doing wrong? Because as I mentioned, last week it was the same conversation, but this week it's the same conversation, but even worse. So Impact have to look at themselves this week and say, what can we do differently? And I think a lot of it probably comes into promotion. I think they need to find a better way to promote. I think this whole AEW Impact Wrestling working relationship, I think they need to talk to AEW, and I think they need to find a way of AEW promoting them more. I don't see the purpose now of the Tony Khan paid ads. I've been a big advocate of them. I've been a big fan of them. I've been a big fan of the Tony Khan heel character on Impact Wrestling. I think they've been pretty good and pretty entertaining. But at this point, those paid ads are nothing but ads. You don't need to advertise AEW or AEW Dynamite on Impact Wrestling. I mean, it's hardly going to spike AEW Dynamite's numbers because only 38,000 watched last night. I think Impact Wrestling need to look at this relationship with AEW and say, right, can they... Obviously, they're allowing us to have Kenny Omega on the show. Obviously, that's a massive plus for us, but we need probably more. And I think having Kenny Omega on the show is one thing, but getting promotion is probably the most important thing. If they can get AEW to promote that Kenny Omega's on the show every week, which they're not really doing, it's just kind of an assumption and kind of a thing that Kenny Omega's going to be there. If AEW openly hyped up that Kenny Omega was going to be on Impact Wrestling every single week, I think that would drive more viewers to watch the show. If you had paid ads from Impact Wrestling on AEW Dynamite on TNT, I think that would spike viewership and that would spike ratings for the show. That's not happening at the moment, and I think that's probably a quick win for Impact Wrestling right now. I think if they really are saying to themselves, what can we do to ensure that that big Thursday show, that first Thursday show on AXS TV, does a good number for us once again and a good rating for us, what can we do? I think they would probably say, what we can do is leverage this relationship with AEW. We can get them to promote the product, we can get them to promote the matches and promote the show, because that's what's not happening right now. And obviously just having Kenny Omega on the show isn't enough. It's not enough, and arguably it's alienating their audience that they had anyway. So It's not good. It really isn't good for Impact Wrestling. It's going to be fascinating to see the numbers for their first Thursday show. You would assume they have to get better. The only way is up, right? I mean, you're going to surely have more people watching because more people are going to be watching pro wrestling next week. I guess the concern would be that there is going to be a lot of competition next week, and maybe people once again just won't be interested in watching Impact Wrestling on Thursday night. We'll have to wait and see. But of course, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Impact Wrestling drawing just 38,000 live viewers on AXS TV for Tuesday's episode, doing the historic record low for AXS TV since they moved in 2019? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.